The Turian research vessel, Infinite Curiosity, descended through Earth's atmosphere under cover of night, its cloaking technology shimmering as it hovered above a small Montana town. The ship's hull, composed of living metal that adapted to atmospheric conditions, rippled slightly as it adjusted to Earth's composition. Commander Exceltor stood on the command deck, his iridescent scales shifting nervously as he reviewed century-old protocols on the holographic display. His 4 eyes, 2 focused on the data, 2 scanning the panoramic view of the sleeping human settlement, blinked in alternating patterns. "Extraction team ready, Commander," reported Science Officer Vexna. Her voice carried the melodic undertones typical of younger Xiturians, those hatched after the Great Reformation. "Target has been selected according to isolation parameters." Zeltor nodded, membrane nictitating across his primary eyes. "Proceed with acquisition of the juvenile specimen. Standard examination protocols. Memory suppression upon return." The extraction team deployed, their environmental suits adapting to match the night sky as they descended toward a modest home at the edge of town, the Miller residence. Their scanners had identified it as ideal, isolated enough for a clean extraction, with minimal security systems. Inside the house, 10-year-old Sophie Miller sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by electronic components. Her dark curly hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her fingers working deftly to adjust the miniature satellite dish connected to her modified radio telescope. 3 nights ago, she detected an unusual frequency pattern that none of the astronomy forums could explain. Tonight, she was determined to record it properly. "Got you," she whispered as her homemade device picked up the strange signal again. The frequency pattern displayed on her tablet was unlike anything in the amateur astronomy databases. Sophie grinned, already composing her post for the Young Astronomers Network in her head. The bedroom window slid open silently, a feat of Xiturian molecular manipulation. Sophie turned, expecting to see the branch that sometimes scraped against her window during windy nights. Instead, she found herself staring at a figure unlike anything she'd ever seen. Humanoid but wrong in subtle, terrifying ways. Sophie opened her mouth to scream, but the Xiturian extraction specialist activated its neural suppressor. The girl froze mid-motion, consciousness maintained but motor functions temporarily suspended, standard procedure for minimizing trauma in specimen collection. What happened next was not in any Xiturian protocol. The bedroom door burst open as Kate Miller, awakened by the faint distinctive hum of the Xiturian equipment, a sound she'd encountered once before, during a classified operation she wasn't supposed to remember, charged into the room. Unlike her daughter, Kate's military implants, residual from her Special Forces days, partially shielded her from the neural suppressor's effects. "Get away from my daughter," she shouted, her body moving with the fluid precision of someone trained to fight through pain and disorientation. The extraction team, faced with a scenario absent from their training simulations, hesitated for 1.3 seconds, enough time for Kate to grab the bedside lamp and swing it in a perfect arc toward the nearest alien. The improvised weapon connected with a satisfying crack against the Xiturian's atmosphere regulator. Extraction protocols dictated immediate retreat in case of complications. The team leader activated the emergency recall as Kate launched herself toward her frozen daughter. "Sophie." Kate reached for her daughter as the Xiturian field enveloped the girl. Her fingers brushed against Sophie's pajama sleeve before both aliens and child vanished in a shimmer of displaced air. Kate stumbled forward into empty space, her momentum carrying her to the floor. For 3 heartbeats, she remained there, processing what had happened. Then military training took over. From her bedside drawer, she retrieved a small metal case containing equipment the government believed had been surrendered when she was dishonorably discharged. The official punishment for an unauthorized rescue mission in a territory where American forces officially never operated. Inside was a prototype tracker, developed for operations involving experimental transportation technologies. Through her window, Kate could see the faint distortion in the night sky, where the cloaked ship hovered. With practiced precision, She armed the tracker and hurled it toward the distortion. The device, designed to adhere to any surface and remain undetectable to most scanning technologies, found its mark just as the alien ship began to ascend. A blast of energy, likely an atmospheric propulsion system, knocked Kate backward as the ship accelerated. Pain seared through her shoulder, where a plasma burn had scorched through her sleep shirt to the skin beneath. Kate didn't scream. She didn't collapse in despair. Instead, her eyes narrowed as she pulled out a phone that hadn't been used in years from the same hidden compartment. She punched in a number that shouldn't still work. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. "This line is disconnected." "Fireteam Chimera," Kate responded, her voice deadly calm, as she watched the stars where her daughter had vanished. "The goalkeeper protocol is now active." A long pause followed. Then, "Confirmation code." Kate recited a string of numbers and letters, then added the phrase that would tell her old team everything they needed to know. "They took my daughter." Above Earth, Commander Exceltor received the extraction team's report with growing concern. The juvenile specimen had been acquired, but there had been unexpected interference from an adult human who had demonstrated unusual resistance to their technology. "Begin standard examination procedures," he ordered, pushing aside his discomfort, "and increase our distance from the planet. Standard protocol for a Class 3 civilization." What neither he nor any Jeturian had ever encountered was a human mother with special forces training, experimental military technology, and nothing left to lose. The asterisk Infinite Curiosity asterisk accelerated toward the dark side of Earth's moon, unaware that they had just committed the most dangerous act possible in the galaxy. They had abducted a Terran offspring. The Jeturian examination chamber hummed with energy as Sophie Miller floated in the suspension field, her vital signs monitored by a dozen different sensors. Junior Science Officer Vexna studied the readouts with growing fascination. "Commander, these readings are unusual," she reported, her inner eyelids flickering with excitement. "The neural complexity is far beyond our classification parameters for Earth species." Commander Exceltor moved to examine the data himself. "Explain." "The cognitive patterns suggest problem-solving capabilities we typically associate with Class 1 or Class 2 civilizations," Vexna said. "And there's something else. The emotional center is incredibly active, even under sedation." Zeltor's scales shifted to a concerned blue-gray. "Could our classification of the planet be inaccurate?" "Unlikely, Commander. Their technological development remains primitive. But this specimen," she gestured to Sophie's suspended form. "Individual variation, perhaps." Neither noticed Sophie's eyes tracking their movements through barely opened lids. The sedation had worn off 15 minutes earlier, but she'd watched enough nature documentaries to know predators responded to movement. So she remained still, listening, cataloging every sound and glimpse she could manage. The aliens' language was incomprehensible, but their technology fascinated her. Everything in the room seemed alive somehow. Surfaces responding to touch, displays appearing in midair, tools reshaping themselves for different functions. If she ever got out of this, the Astronomy Forum would never believe her. When she got out, Sophie corrected herself mentally. Mom would come. She always came. 3,000 kilometers below, Kate Miller stood in an abandoned missile silo that officially didn't exist, surrounded by people who were officially dead. "You look like hell, goalkeeper," Marcus Okafor said, embracing her briefly before returning to the makeshift workstation, where he was assembling what appeared to be impossible technology. His official death certificate listed laboratory accident as the cause, a convenient cover when he refused to weaponize his aerospace innovations. "Circumstances, Tinker," Kate replied, using his old team call sign. Her eyes swept the underground facility where her former squad had gathered in less than 6 hours. Status report. Lin Chen, Ghost to Fireteam Chimera, looked up from an array of screens displaying satellite feeds that she definitely didn't have legal access to. Trackers working. They're holding position on the dark side of the moon. Her death had been more elaborate. A car crash, fire, closed casket funeral. Necessary when the world's best cyber warfare specialist decided her skills were being misused. "What's their game?" asked Riley Sanchez, Wraith, as she cleaned a weapon that incorporated both conventional and distinctly unconventional components. After Fireteam Chimera was officially disbanded, she disappeared into the wilderness, emerging occasionally to run survival courses for wealthy clients who never realized their instructor was a legend in Black Ops circles. "Unknown," Kate said, applying nanogenic healing gel to her plasma burn. "But they took my daughter, so their game is forfeit." Marcus gestured toward the center of the silo, where a tarp covered something massive. "Remember that prototype we didn't develop for the Pentagon? The one based on the tech we didn't recover from that crash site in Arizona." Kate's eyes widened slightly. "You kept it." "Improved it," Marcus corrected, pulling away the tarp to reveal a sleek craft that resembled no known human design. "Meet Nemesis *. She's atmosphere-capable, space-worthy, and very, very angry." "How long?" Kate asked. 3 hours to finish pre-flight," Marcus replied. "Assuming Ghost can get us launch clearance." Lynn smiled thinly. "Already working on it. Every military satellite in range will conveniently experience a diagnostic cycle when we need to launch." Kate nodded, then turned to a digital display showing her daughter's vital signs. Transmitted by the subdermal tracker all Fireteam Chimera families had received after a previous kidnapping incident. "Hold on, Sophie. We're coming." Aboard the Infinite Curiosity, Sophie saw her opportunity when a junior officer, moved by what he interpreted as distress signals from the small human, placed his data tablet within her reach while adjusting suspension field parameters. The moment his attention shifted to another console, Sophie's fingers danced across the alien interface. The symbols made no sense, but the organizational logic felt strangely intuitive, similar to the coding she'd been teaching herself for science fair projects. 3 quick swipes, a pattern that might access system functions based on the officer's previous actions. And she was in. The display changed, showing what appeared to be ship schematics. Sophie memorized as much as she could before the officer returned, quickly returning the tablet to its previous display. He retrieved it, oblivious to her actions, and offered what seemed like a reassuring gesture before leaving. Left alone, Sophie began systematically testing her suspension field, identifying minute fluctuations when she moved certain ways. There was a pattern to it, a rhythm she could potentially exploit. "Cellular structure analysis complete," reported the Jeturian biological specialist. "Results are perplexing." Commander Xeltor reviewed the findings, his secondary heart accelerating in concern. "These regenerative capabilities and the genetic adaptability, these aren't consistent with primitive evolutionary patterns." "No, Commander. By all standards, humans should be classified as an emerging adaptive species. Their current technological development is incongruent with their biological potential." Xeltor felt the first stirrings of real worry. In 3,000 years of exploration, the Jeturians had developed reliable models for species development. Exceptions were problematic. His concerns deepened when the ship's security system reported an anomaly, a small biohazard alert in the ventilation system near the examination chamber. Likely nothing, but protocols demanded investigation. As personnel were diverted to follow safety procedures, neither Exceltor nor his team noticed the minor fluctuations in the specimen's suspension field, or the small hand reaching toward the environmental controls. On Earth, military installations worldwide scrambled as multiple tracking stations detected the alien vessel. Emergency protocols activated globally, sending armed forces into chaos as top commanders tried to determine which nation had launched the unidentified craft, and whether this constituted first strike in a new world war. At the Pentagon, generals argued over response options, while satellite imagery confirmed their worst fears: an unauthorized launch from American soil, specifically from a decommissioned site in Colorado. "Get me answers," demanded the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Who the hell breached a black site and launched an experimental aircraft toward an unidentified object? Izad, white-faced, handed him a message. Sir, we just received this transmission from the launch site. The message was brief. Goalkeeper protocol active. Stand down or stand aside. The chairman's face drained of color. God help us all, he whispered, recognizing the code phrase from a program that had supposedly been terminated years ago. And God help whoever took her kid. In Colorado, the Nemesis rose from its underground silo, its propulsion system leaving no heat signature, no sonic boom. Only a faint distortion in the air as it accelerated toward the stars, carrying a mother determined to rewrite the rules of first contact. In lunar orbit, Commander Exceltor received the first proximity alert, staring in disbelief at the readings. Impossible, he whispered as his crew scrambled to make sense of the approaching craft. They can't have this technology. The Jecturian commander didn't know that impossibility had never stopped Kate Miller before. And it certainly wouldn't now, with her daughter's life at stake. The Nemesis climbed through Earth's atmosphere at a speed that defied conventional aerospace engineering, its hull composed of materials that had never been officially documented in any human scientific journal. Inside the cockpit, Marcus Tinker Okafer's hands danced across controls that melded familiar aviation interfaces with technology reverse-engineered from fragments that shouldn't exist. Approaching orbital threshold, he announced, voice steady despite the crushing G-forces, the craft's inertial dampeners, another technology that officially didn't exist, strained under the aggressive ascent profile. Kate sat in the co-pilot's seat, eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the alien vessel's position. Time to intercept. 17 minutes, Marcus replied, assuming they maintain current position. In the rear compartment, Lynn worked furiously across multiple interfaces, her cybernetic implants connecting directly with the craft's communication systems. I'm picking up massive chatter from Earth military channels. Everyone's losing their minds over our launch. Let them, Kate said, checking the weapon systems Marcus had integrated into the craft. Some were conventional, railguns and missile systems. Others were decidedly not, incorporating technology from the same source that had inspired the Nemesis itself. Any response from the target? Nothing yet, Lynn reported. Either they don't see us or they don't consider us a threat, Riley finished, securing the last of her specialized infiltration gear. Arrogant bastards. Kate nodded grimly. Perfect. Aboard the Infinite Curiosity, chaos erupted as the environmental system in the specimen sector suddenly registered a critical failure. Alarms blared as atmospheric pressure fluctuated wildly throughout 3 decks. Report, Commander Exceltor demanded, his scales shifting to emergency response coloration. Unknown malfunction in environmental control, the operations officer responded, fingers dancing across holographic interfaces, attempting to isolate. Sir, interrupted the security chief. The specimen, it's no longer in the examination chamber. Exceltor's secondary heart nearly stopped. Impossible. The suspension field was deactivated, sir, from an external terminal. Before Exceltor could process this impossibility, another alarm sounded, this one far more concerning. Commander, we're detecting an approaching craft, the sensor operator reported, voice rising in disbelief. Origin. Earth. Exceltor rushed to the main view screen, watching as the impossible became reality. A small craft of unmistakably human design, yet moving with capability centuries beyond their classified technological level. Defensive systems online, ordered Exceltor. Prepare countermeasures. The tactical officer frowned at his console. Sir, targeting systems are having difficulty establishing a lock. The craft's trajectory is erratic. On the view screen, the human vessel performed a series of maneuvers that seemed deliberately designed to confuse Jecturian tracking algorithms. Sudden vector changes, momentary power fluctuations, irregular acceleration patterns. That's not possible, whispered the tactical officer. They can't know our targeting parameters. But Seltor was beginning to suspect that everything they thought they knew about humans might be catastrophically wrong. Sophie Miller crawled through the alien ship's ventilation system, her small size allowing her to navigate passages the Jeturians had never designed for bipedal access. The ship schematic she'd memorized from the tablet gave her a rough idea of the vessel's layout, and she'd already identified what appeared to be a secondary environmental control node. Reaching it, she examined the alien interface with the same methodical curiosity she applied to taking apart household electronics. The symbols were incomprehensible, but the organizational logic, the way information was grouped and structured, felt oddly intuitive. She recalled the movements the alien officer had made on the tablet, the pattern of accessing system functions. With careful precision, she mimicked those gestures on the environmental panel. The interface responded, displaying what appeared to be atmospheric regulation controls. Sophie allowed herself a small smile. Then, with the same deliberate focus she applied to science fair projects, she began introducing systematic chaos into the ship's environmental systems. Kate watched the alien vessel grow larger in the view screen as Marcus executed another series of unpredictable maneuvers. The Nemesis shuddered as energy discharges from the alien ship narrowly missed them. Their targeting systems are adaptive, Marcus warned, hands never stopping their dance across the controls. Each evasion pattern becomes less effective. Kate nodded. Get us close enough for insertion. Ghost, what's our communication status? Lynn looked up from her station. I've been analyzing their transmission frequencies. They're using some kind of subspace communication FATS. She paused, frowning. Wait, something's happening. Their internal communications just spiked, and there's a pattern disruption in their systems. Sophie, Kate whispered, allowing herself a moment of fierce pride. She's creating a diversion. Riley moved to the airlock, checking her specialized gear one final time. Ready for breach on your mark. Kate joined her, securing her helmet and activating the experimental combat suit that incorporated both ballistic protection and technology designed to disrupt certain energy frequencies. Hold position at 20 meters, Tinker. Execute breach package on my command. Marcus nodded grimly. Good hunting, goalkeeper. As Kate and Riley prepared for vacuum breach tactics, Earth's governments were finally organizing a coordinated response. Military satellites worldwide repositioned to track the alien vessel, while launch facilities prepared response craft. Too late to reach the confrontation, but establishing humanity's unified intention. In the White House Situation Room, the president received briefings from increasingly panicked military advisors. Mr. President, we've identified the unauthorized craft, the Secretary of Defense reported. It's goalkeeper. The president's face paled. Kate Miller. I was told that program was terminated. It was, sir, officially and unofficially. The secretary hesitated. Sir, there are certain contingencies that remain active, regardless of official policy. The president's eyes narrowed. Are you telling me we have a rogue special forces team engaging an alien vessel without authorization? Not exactly unauthorized, sir, the National Security Advisor interjected quietly. The goalkeeper protocol exists specifically for this scenario. What scenario? First contact gone wrong, sir. Specifically, the advisor swallowed hard. Specifically when a hostile force takes a team member's family. Understanding dawned on the president's face. They took her kid. These aliens abducted Kate Miller's daughter. The room fell silent as the implications settled. God help them, the president finally said. And God help us all if she can't get her back. Commander Xeltor stared at the ship's diagnostics in disbelief. Environmental systems failing, targeting arrays malfunctioning, internal sensors reporting contradictory information. And now a human vessel executing maneuvers that should be technologically impossible for their species was preparing to dock. Sir, his first officer said quietly, High Command is demanding a status update. Xeltor's scales had shifted to the dull gray of uncertain dread. Tell them, he began, then paused as a new alert sounded. The hull breach warning. On the external cameras, he watched in disbelief as two figures emerged from the human craft. Instead of the expected vacuum exposure deaths, they'd moved with purpose toward his vessel, carrying devices of unknown function. The first figure placed something against the hull. Moments later, alarms screamed as sensors detected a molecular disruption in the outer hull, a precise, controlled breach that shouldn't be possible with Earth technology. All security teams to the breach point. Zeltor ordered, his voice steady despite the growing certainty that something had gone catastrophically wrong with what should have been a routine research mission. As he watched the human figures enter his ship through the impossible breach, a cold realization settled in his primary heart. They had made a terrible mistake in their assessment of this species, and they were about to learn exactly how terrible. The molecular breach sealed behind Kate and Riley as they entered the alien vessel, the specialized compound they'd applied reforming the ship's hull to prevent atmospheric loss. Both women moved with practiced efficiency, their combat suits incorporating technology that hadn't been declassified even to most special forces. Atmosphere reads breathable, Riley reported, checking the sensors built into her gauntlet. Gravity 0.9 Earth standard. Temperature elevated, approximately 30 Celsius. Kate nodded, removing her helmet and immediately drawing the compact weapon holstered at her thigh. A modified railgun that fired specialized ammunition designed to work against targets with unknown physiology. Life signs, she asked, voice calm despite the thundering of her heart. Riley consulted her scanner. Multiple non-human signatures throughout the vessel. And, her voice caught slightly. One human. 3 decks down. Port quadrant. Sophie. Kate breathed, relief washing through her for a brief moment before tactical focus reasserted itself. Lid route, I'll cover. They moved through corridors that seemed almost alive, surfaces pulsing with subtle luminescence and doors, rising open in patterns that suggested conscious design rather than mechanical function. The ship itself felt like an organism, responsive and aware. Turning a corner, they encountered their first Jaturian, a security officer whose scales shifted from standard patrol blue to alarmed crimson upon spotting the intruders. The alien raised a device that pulsed with energy, its mouth opening to emit what might have been a warning or command. Kate didn't hesitate. Her railgun discharged with a barely audible hiss, the specialized projectile striking the alien's device rather than the being itself. The weapon erupted in a shower of crystalline fragments as the Jaturian stumbled backward in shock. Before the alien could recover, Riley was on it, applying a neural disruptor patch to what scans suggested was a primary nerve cluster. The Jaturian collapsed, conscious but temporarily paralyzed. Kate knelt beside the fallen officer, looking directly into its 4 eyes. "My daughter," she said clearly, displaying Sophie's image on her wrist projector. "Where?" The Jaturian stared back, its eyes blinking in a pattern that might have conveyed confusion or fear. Then, hesitantly, it gestured with a 3-fingered hand toward a specific corridor. Kate nodded once in acknowledgement before she and Riley continued their advance, leaving the disabled officer behind. They weren't expecting resistance, Riley observed quietly, especially not inside their own ship. "Good," Kate replied. "I like being underestimated." In the ship's command center, Commander Exceltor watched the security feed with growing alarm as the human intruders neutralized another security team, their 4th, with disturbing efficiency. "How are they doing this?" demanded his security chief, scales pulsing with stress patterns. "Their tactics counter our standard protocols perfectly." Exceltor had begun to form a disturbing theory. "Because they've seen our protocols before," he said quietly. "Access the classified archives. Search for any record of previous Jaturian contact with humans." "Sir, that would violate secrecy directives," his first officer objected. "We are beyond directives." Exceltor snapped. "Do it now." As his officers scrambled to comply, another alarm sounded, this one from the ship's propulsion system. "Commander." The engineering liaison's voice rose in panic. Someone has accessed the auxiliary control node. Drive parameters are being manually overridden. Impossible. Seltor began, but the word had lost all meaning in the past hour. Lock it down. We can't, sir. The commands are being entered through the environmental subsystem, a pathway that shouldn't even exist. Seltor felt his scales shifting to the modeled pattern of deep distress. Something was systematically dismantling his ship's operations, something that understood Jeturian systems well enough to find weaknesses that shouldn't exist. Sir, his communications officer interrupted. We're receiving an emergency transmission from High Command. The main view screen shifted to display a senior Jeturian official, her ceremonial scales indicating council leadership. Commander Seltor, she began without preamble. Terminate your mission immediately. Return the human specimen and withdraw from Earth space. Seltor blinked in confusion. Counselor, we're under attack. The humans have breached. We are aware. The counselor cut him off. Our observation posts have detected previously hidden human military satellites activating throughout their orbital sphere. Weapons systems far beyond their classified capabilities are coming online. The implication struck Seltor like a physical blow. They concealed their true development level. So it appears, the counselor replied grimly. Your routine collection mission has triggered a first contact scenario with a species far more dangerous than our intelligence suggested. Return the specimen immediately. As the transmission ended, Seltor turned to his increasingly panicked crew. Find the human juvenile, he ordered. Prepare it for immediate return. Sir, his first officer said hesitantly, the archives show there was a previous contact incident. 80 local years ago, a research vessel disappeared while conducting standard biological sampling in a region called Arizona. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. The humans hadn't just developed their technology. They'd been studying Jeturian technology for decades. And now, they were using that knowledge against its creators. Sophie Miller crouched inside an access junction she discovered while navigating the ship's maintenance pathways. Using the small toolkit she always carried in her pajama pocket, a habit her mother had encouraged, she had carefully disconnected and reconnected neural pathways in what appeared to be a secondary control node. The same intuitive understanding that made her a prodigy with Earth electronics served her well here. The alien technology operated on principles she couldn't possibly understand, but the organizational logic, the way systems communicated with each other, followed patterns she could recognize and manipulate. A soft warning tone from her makeshift detector, fashioned from components of her radio telescope, alerted her to approaching life forms. Sophie quickly sealed the access panel and retreated deeper into the maintenance shaft, using the ship schematic she'd memorized to navigate toward what she hoped was a primary control sector. She wasn't just running or hiding anymore. Sophie had a plan: to create enough system disruptions to help her mother find her. Because despite the fear gnawing at her stomach, Sophie Miller knew one thing with absolute certainty: her mother was coming for her, and heaven help the aliens who stood in her way. Kate and Riley reached a critical junction where 3 corridors met at what appeared to be a major transportation node. As they approached, doors rised open at the far end of each corridor, revealing Jeturian security teams moving into position. Tactical assessment, Kate asked calmly, already calculating angles and priorities. Riley's eyes narrowed behind her tactical visor. 3 teams, 4 hostiles each, standard containment formation. They're learning. Kate nodded, reaching for a specialized device on her belt, one of Marcus's inventions that incorporated principles from salvaged alien technology. Cover your eyes. She activated the device and tossed it into the center of the junction. It detonated with a pulse of energy specifically calibrated to disrupt Jeturian optical systems without permanently damaging them. The effect was immediate. The security teams stumbled in disorientation, their coordinated approach dissolving into confusion. Kate and Riley moved through the chaos with practiced precision, applying neural disruptors and targeted strikes to incapacitate rather than kill. Within moments, the junction was secured. Riley checked her scanner again. Sophie's signal is stronger. We're close. As if in response to her words, the ship's lighting suddenly shifted to emergency protocols, bathing the corridors in a pulsing amber glow as yet another system fell to Sophie's improvised sabotage. Kate allowed herself a small, fierce smile. That's my girl. Elsewhere on the ship, Commander Exceltor made the painful decision to activate first contact protocols, procedures reserved for species far more advanced than humans had been classified. The situation had escalated beyond standard containment measures. The time had come to acknowledge what was increasingly obvious. They had catastrophically underestimated the species called human. And they were about to pay the price for that error. A soft vibration against her wrist made her freeze. The small device she'd assembled from parts of her radio telescope was picking up new human communication frequencies. Her heart leaped as she recognized the encrypted pattern. Her mother's tactical comm signature. Sophie activated the small transmitter she'd cobbled together from alien components, sending a simple pulse pattern that she and her mother had practiced during their emergency drills, games that Kate had insisted were important, though Sophie had never imagined they'd be used like this. Kate's tactical display buzzed with an incoming signal, displaying a familiar pattern that made her breath catch. "She's alive," Kate whispered, relief washing through her before tactical focus reasserted itself. "And active. Coordinates locked." Riley nodded, checking the ship schematic they'd compiled from their scanners. 3 levels down, approaching central control. "Smart kid." "The smartest," Kate agreed, pride momentarily overriding the fear that had driven her across the void. "New route. We meet her halfway." They altered course, moving with increased urgency. The alien ship's response had become more coordinated, suggesting the crew was adapting to their intrusion tactics. Twice they were forced to use more aggressive countermeasures against security teams, though still prioritizing incapacitation over lethal force. Kate had no intention of starting an interstellar war. She just wanted her daughter back. Commander Exceltor stood in the ship's central command chamber, watching as his crew fought a losing battle against cascading system failures. The situation had spiraled beyond all protocols. A supposedly routine specimen collection from a primitive world had escalated into a first contact crisis that threatened to upend centuries of exploration doctrine. "Commander," his first officer reported, scales shifted to the gray-blue of extreme distress. "We've lost control of environmental systems on decks 3 through 5. Security teams report the human intruders are converging on central control, and—" He hesitated. "Continue," Zeltor ordered. "Sir, the specimen, the human juvenile, appears to be systematically sabotaging our systems, using methodologies that shouldn't be possible for a pre-spaceflight species." Zeltor's secondary heart constricted. "You're suggesting coordinated action. The adult intruders and the juvenile are working together." "The evidence suggests so, Commander." A new alert sounded, this one from the external sensors. "Multiple Earth vessels launching," reported the sensor officer. "Primitive chemical propulsion, but—" His voice faltered. "Sir, they're carrying energy signatures we can't identify. And their launch trajectories suggest coordinated action among multiple nation-states." The implications were staggering. Not only had they catastrophically underestimated human technological capability, but they'd somehow triggered unified action among a species whose historical records showed constant internal conflict. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "High Command is demanding immediate situation update. The Galactic Council has been notified of a potential first contact violation." Zeltor felt the weight of 3,000 years of Jaturian exploration history settling on his shoulders. His decision now would affect interstellar relations for centuries to come. "Initiate First Contact Protocol Epsilon," he ordered, invoking procedures reserved for encountering spacefaring civilizations. "Prepare neural translation systems. I will attempt direct communication with the human intruders." Sophie Miller reached the junction where her cobbled-together scanner indicated her mother would appear. Her heart raced with equal parts fear and excitement. Fear of the aliens who might still recapture her, excitement at seeing her mother again. The sound of approaching footsteps sent her ducking behind a bulkhead, holding her breath as she peered around the corner. The tension in her shoulders released instantly at the familiar silhouette that appeared. Her mother, moving with the focused precision that Sophie had always associated with safety. "Mom," she called, rushing from her hiding place. Kate turned instantly, weapon lowering as she recognized her daughter. For one brief moment, the hardened Special Forces operative vanished, replaced by a mother who thought she might never see her child again. She dropped to one knee, gathering Sophie into a fierce embrace. "I knew you'd come," Sophie whispered against her mother's shoulder. "Always," Kate replied simply, holding her daughter tightly before tactical necessity reasserted itself. She pulled back, quickly examining Sophie for injuries. "Are you hurt?" Sophie shook her head. "I'm okay. I've been causing trouble." There was unmistakable pride in her voice. "I noticed," Kate said with a small smile. "You've done incredibly well, Sophie. But we need to move now." Riley approached, keeping watch on the surrounding corridors. "Hate to break up the reunion, but we've got company coming." Kate nodded, battle focus returning. "Sophie, stay between us. We're heading back to the extraction point." "Wait," Sophie said urgently. "I found something important. The central control room. They have data about Earth. They've been watching us for decades." Kate and Riley exchanged glances. This changed the mission parameters significantly. "Show us," Kate decided. Sophie led them through a maintenance passage she'd discovered, bypassing the approaching security team. As they moved, she quietly explained her discoveries, how she'd navigated the ship systems, identified control nodes, and systematically created diversions to aid her mother's approach. Kate listened with a mixture of parental pride and tactical assessment. Her daughter, with no formal training and armed with nothing but her own ingenuity, had effectively crippled an advanced alien vessel. The implications were staggering, both for Sophie's future and for humanity's understanding of their own capabilities. They emerged near what Sophie identified as a secondary control node, where she discovered access to the ship's historical database. "They have files on Earth going back centuries," Sophie explained, pointing to the alien interface. "I couldn't read it, but I recognized the images. They'd been studying us the whole time." Before Kate could respond, the ship's communication system activated, and an alien voice, translated through some unknown technology into rough but understandable English, echoed through the corridor. "Human intruders," the voice said. "This is Commander Xeltor. I request peaceful communication. The specimen, your offspring, will be returned unharmed. We did not understand. Please respond." Kate's eyes narrowed as she assessed this new development. After a moment's consideration, she activated her tactical comm. "This is Kate Miller," she replied, her voice coldly precise. "You abducted my daughter. Peaceful communication was never an option." Commander Xeltor stood in the ship's communication center, surrounded by his increasingly agitated senior officers. The human's response had sent ripples of disquiet through the command staff. "Peaceful communication was never an option," repeated his first officer. "Commander, this species exhibits alarming aggression patterns." "No," corrected the xenopsychologist who had been hastily summoned from the research division. "Not aggression, protection. There's a critical distinction we've overlooked." Xeltor gestured for elaboration. "Sir, preliminary analysis of the juvenile specimen showed neural bonding patterns unlike anything in our database," the specialist explained, bringing up comparative brain scans on the main display. "The emotional centers show development specifically evolved for attachment to offspring, far more intense than any spacefaring species we've encountered." "Explain the significance," Xeltor demanded. "Commander, by our own ethical standards, we may have committed a grave violation," the specialist said, scales shifting to the deep blue of professional concern. If human pair bonding includes neurological attachment to offspring as a primary evolutionary adaptation, then our standard collection protocols would be equivalent to. She hesitated. To what? Seltor pressed. To torture, sir. A profound silence fell over the command center as the implications settled. Open the channel again, Seltor ordered, his scales shifting to the formal pattern of diplomatic engagement. When the connection was established, he spoke carefully. Human Kate Miller, I request direct communication. Our species has protocols for formal first contact that would allow peaceful resolution. The response came swiftly. You've been observing our planet for decades according to your own records. You knew exactly what you were doing when you took my child. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a deliberate act of aggression. Zeltor felt his primary heart constrict. The human was correct. Somewhere in the vast Jaturian bureaucracy, their intelligence on Earth had been catastrophically mishandled. But there might still be a path to resolution. I propose a meeting, he said. Your group and my command staff. We will address your concerns and negotiate terms for peaceful conclusion to this incident. A long pause followed before the human responded. Location: Central Conference Chamber, Level 2. Your offspring will remain with you. Agreed. But understand this. Kate's voice carried the deadly calm that had made her legendary among those who had served with her. My team has placed destabilization charges throughout your vessel. One wrong move, and this ship never reaches home. The connection closed, leaving the command staff staring at their commander in varying states of distress. Is that possible? Seltor asked his security chief. Could they have planted such devices? Unknown, sir, the security chief admitted. Our internal sensors are compromised, and human technology appears to be. He paused, searching for the appropriate term. Unpredictable. Zeltor made his decision. Prepare the conference chamber. Full diplomatic protocols. Sir, objected his first officer, regulations require containment protocols for pre-spaceflight species, not diplomatic engagement. Look around you. Zeltor responded, gesturing to the cascade of system failures displayed on every monitor. Does this look like a pre-spaceflight species to you? They penetrated our defenses, compromised our systems, and coordinated a global military response within hours. Either our classification is catastrophically wrong, or he left the alternative unspoken. The junior science officer, Vexna, stepped forward hesitantly. Commander, request permission to access the restricted xenobiological database. Zeltor nodded, curious. Vexna's fingers danced across the interface, bypassing security protocols with authorization codes that shouldn't have been available to her rank. The command staff watched in growing alarm as she accessed highly classified files. Sir, she said finally, there are inconsistencies in our records of human development. According to suppressed research conducted 80 years ago, humans were identified as having unusual neurological patterns that suggested rapid adaptive potential. And Zeltor prompted. And the research was classified by order of the Resource Acquisition Council, Vexna said quietly. The implications hung in the air. The Resource Acquisition Council oversaw exploitation of resources in systems with pre-spaceflight civilizations, operations that would be prohibited in regions with protected species status. They deliberately misclassified humans. Zeltor realized, his scales shifting to the pale yellow of profound shock. To maintain access to this system's resources, the outer planets show evidence of extensive mining operations, Vexna confirmed. Operations that would violate galactic protocols if Earth were correctly classified. The revelation spread through the command center like a shockwave, scales shifting to distress patterns across the entire staff. They had been made unwitting accomplices in a profound ethical violation. Kate, Sophie, and Riley moved through the alien corridors toward the designated meeting point, maintaining tactical awareness despite the apparent truce. Sophie walked between the two women, her expression a mixture of fear and fascination as she studied the ship's architecture. They're nervous, Sophie observed quietly. The lights are pulsing in a different pattern now. Kate glanced at her daughter with quiet pride. Even in this extraordinary situation, Sophie's innate observational skills remained sharp. "Stay alert," Kate reminded them. "This could still be a trap." They reached the conference chamber, a circular room with a large central table surrounded by seating designed for Jeturian physiology. Commander Zeltor awaited them, flanked by several officers whose scale patterns suggested varying degrees of agitation. "Human delegates," Zeltor began formally, the translation system converting his speech into stilted but understandable English. "I welcome you to formal communication under Galactic Protocol 7 Alpha." Kate's expression remained coldly neutral. "I'm not interested in your protocols. I'd want answers. Why did you take my daughter? And what have you been doing in our solar system for the past 80 years? The directness of the question created visible discomfort among the Jeturian officers, their scales shifting in patterns of distress. "Your species was classified as pre-spaceflight developmental stage," Zeltor explained, choosing his words carefully. "Standard research protocols permit limited specimen collection for scientific study. You call abducting children a standard protocol." Kate's voice cut like a blade. "Where I come from, we call that a war crime." The translation system conveyed her words throughout the chamber, creating an immediate reaction among the junior officers present. Their scales shifted to patterns that the humans couldn't interpret, but the body language was clear: profound distress. One officer stepped forward, the female who had accessed the classified files. "Commander, with permission, I must speak." Without waiting for approval, she addressed Kate directly. "Human Kate Miller, grave errors have been made. Your species was deliberately misclassified to permit resource extraction in your system's outer planets." The chamber erupted in chaos as senior officers objected to this breach of protocol. Zeltor raised a hand, silencing them. "Is this true?" he demanded. "The evidence exists in our own databases," Vexna insisted. "Human neurological patterns were identified as indicating protected status decades ago. The research was suppressed." Kate's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. "You've been stealing resources from our solar system, and you classified us as primitives to avoid legal consequences." The accusation hung in the air, unanswerable because it was fundamentally true. Centuries of Jeturian exploration ethics had been compromised by bureaucratic corruption and resource greed. "Mom," Sophie whispered, tugging at Kate's sleeve. "Their colors are changing. I think some of them didn't know." Kate studied the alien officers, recognizing the signs of a command structure in crisis. This was no longer just about getting Sophie back. They had stumbled into something much larger. "I want every record you have on human biology, Earth history, and your operations in our solar system," Kate demanded, "along with a formal acknowledgement of violation of your own protocols." "Such a demand is unprecedented from a non-council species," Zeltor began, but Kate cut him off. "So is having your ship systems compromised by a 10-year-old human girl," she said coldly. "You've underestimated us for the last time." The words settled over the chamber like a physical weight. In that moment, the balance of power in the room, and perhaps in the relationship between species, shifted irrevocably. The news spread through subspace channels like wildfire. Within hours of the Infinite Curiosity's transmission reaching Jeturian High Command, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session for the first time in 3 centuries. Representatives from 17 spacefaring civilizations gathered in the ancient chamber on neutral territory. Faces and appendages and sensory clusters all turned toward the Jeturian counselor, whose scales had shifted to the formal gray-blue of extreme diplomatic distress. "The situation is unprecedented," she admitted, addressing the assembly. "A standard research mission has exposed potentially deliberate misclassification of a developing species, raising profound ethical questions about our protocols." The Vordani representative, a crystalline entity whose thoughts manifested as pulses of light, flashed in patterns indicating skepticism. "The humans breached a Jeturian vessel using technology they shouldn't possess. The more pressing question is how they acquired such capabilities. Perhaps, countered the Eldraxian delegate, their feathered crests rising in the pattern denoting analytical insight. The more significant question is why we failed to recognize their potential in the first place. As the debate intensified, analysts throughout council space began reviewing their own records of developing civilizations, searching for similar classification discrepancies. The resulting data cascades triggered automated ethics evaluations in dozens of research institutions, creating ripple effects throughout the established scientific order. On Earth, governments worldwide struggled to maintain social order as fragments of information about the alien encounter leaked through military and intelligence channels. Satellite imagery of the confrontation in lunar orbit appeared on social media platforms, triggering waves of public speculation and panic. In the White House Situation Room, the president received hourly updates as a hastily assembled scientific and military task force analyzed the limited data available. "What's their status?" he demanded, looking exhausted after 36 sleepless hours. "The Nemesis maintains position alongside the alien vessel," the Secretary of Defense reported. "Our last communication from Kate Miller indicated negotiations were ongoing." He hesitated. "She's what?" the president pressed. "Sir, she's making demands on behalf of Earth, without authorization." The National Security Advisor cleared her throat. "Mr. President, given the circumstances, the Goalkeeper Protocol does actually grant her that authority. She's a discharged Special Forces operative, not a diplomat," objected the Secretary of State. "With respect, sir," the NSA countered, "she's currently the only human being in direct contact with an advanced alien civilization, and based on what we know of Kate Miller, I wouldn't bet against her." The president rubbed his temples. "What about the daughter?" "Sophie. Safe, according to last report, and apparently instrumental in compromising the alien vessel's systems." This drew a moment of stunned silence. "A child hacked an alien spaceship?" the president finally asked. "Sir," the NSA replied with a hint of pride, "she's Kate Miller's daughter." Aboard the Infinite Curiosity, a power struggle had erupted among the command staff. Commander Exceltor faced direct challenge from his security chief, who advocated immediate purging of all sensitive data and termination of the human intruders. "The protocols are clear," insisted the security chief, his scales displaying the aggressive red patterns of confrontation. "Contamination containment takes precedence over all other considerations." The protocols were compromised decades ago. Seltor countered, standing firm despite the growing dissent among his senior staff. "When our own people deliberately misclassified humans to exploit their system's resources." Junior Science Officer Vexna had become the commander's most vocal supporter, having assembled irrefutable evidence of the classification fraud. "The humans exhibit all 7 markers of protected species status," she argued, displaying comparative neurological scans. "Their capacity for abstract reasoning, technological adaptation, and social cooperation all exceed minimum thresholds." The debate might have continued indefinitely if not for Sophie Miller, the human child who had been quietly observing the alien power dynamics with remarkable insight, suddenly stepped forward. "You're all missing the point," she said, her clear voice cutting through the translator system and silencing the Jeturian arguments. "You're so busy arguing about what to do about us that you haven't asked what we might do about you." All eyes turned to the small human, whose expression carried a confidence far beyond her years. "Sophie," Kate began cautiously, but her daughter continued. "Mom, I've seen their database. They have technology that could help us. Medical advances, environmental restoration techniques, clean energy. Things we need." She turned back to the assembled aliens. "But you also need something from us, don't you? Otherwise, why study us for so long?" Commander Xeltor's scales shifted to a pattern indicating reluctant acknowledgement. "Your species has demonstrated unusual adaptive capabilities, cognitive flexibility that our own developments have begun to lose after millennia of technological reliance." Sophie nodded, as if confirming a hypothesis. So here's my proposal. Earth withholds military response in exchange for technology sharing, specifically medical and environmental restoration capabilities. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this child's proposal registered. A pre-spaceflight species negotiating terms with a Galactic Council member was unprecedented. More shocking still was the realization that they had leverage. Such exchanges are prohibited with developing worlds, the security chief objected automatically. A prohibition you already violated by mining our outer planets, Kate pointed out coldly. Sophie's proposal is more than generous considering the circumstances. Before the debate could intensify, alarms blared throughout the ship. The hardline faction within the crew had made their move, attempting to seize control of critical systems to implement containment protocols that would eliminate all evidence, including the human specimens. What they hadn't anticipated was that Sophie had already compromised the ship's security architecture. The moment unauthorized commands entered the system, countermeasures she had established activated automatically, locking out the conspirators. More significantly, Kate had prepared for betrayal. During the supposed negotiations, Riley had completed a secondary mission, establishing a direct uplink to Earth using the alien ship's own communication array. As the hardliners made their move, the entire ship's database began transmitting to receive stations on Earth, bypassing all security protocols. "What have you done?" demanded the security chief, scales bleaching to shock white as system after system reported unauthorized data transmission. "Insurance," Kate replied calmly. "Every record of your presence in our solar system, every biological scan, every technological specification. It's all being transmitted to Earth right now." The implications were staggering. A pre-spaceflight civilization was now in possession of data that would advance their development by centuries overnight. Commander Exeltor, recognizing the existential shift occurring before him, made the only decision possible under the circumstances. He opened a direct channel to the Galactic Council. "This is Commander Exeltor of the research vessel Infinite Curiosity," he announced formally. "I hereby invoke Emergency Protocol Theta 9. First contact with a previously misclassified species has occurred under circumstances requiring immediate Council intervention." The protocols he had invoked were ancient, established in the early days of galactic exploration for situations where standard classifications failed catastrophically. They bypassed normal diplomatic channels, granting the contacted species provisional recognition regardless of their developmental stage. Kate Miller, former Special Forces operative turned unwitting diplomat, found herself addressing the Galactic Council directly. Her leverage absolute as humans worldwide began processing the transmitted data, advancing technological understanding decades in a matter of hours. "On behalf of Earth, I formally protest the violation of our sovereign system and demand recognition of our status as a protected developing civilization," she stated, the words feeding directly into the Council's emergency session. Across 17 worlds, representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations found themselves confronting an unprecedented situation. A species that had leaped from pre-spaceflight classification to direct Council negotiation in less than a standard day, driven by nothing more than a mother's determination to recover her child. As the implications reverberated through galactic civilization, Sophie Miller stood beside her mother, watching history unfold with the clear-eyed wonder of a child who had always believed the stars held more than most adults dared imagine. 6 months after the incident that would become known in galactic records as the Terran Awakening, Kate Miller stood before the Galactic Council in Earth's first official embassy in neutral space, the repurposed Jeturian research vessel now rechristened Prometheus. The ship that had once abducted her daughter had been transformed, its alien architecture melded with distinctly human aesthetics. Where sterile efficiency had reigned, now art and color brought warmth to formerly clinical spaces. The conference chamber where Kate had first confronted Commander Exeltor now served as humanity's diplomatic center, its circular design symbolizing the unexpected equality that had emerged from conflict. Kate wore the formal uniform of Earth's Diplomatic Defense Corps, a newly established organization bridging military readiness with interstellar diplomacy. At her side stood Sophie, now 11 years old and officially designated as humanity's junior ambassador, her natural aptitude for xenolinguistics and interspecies negotiation having blossomed under formal training. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," Kate began, her voice carrying throughout the chamber with practiced authority. "6 months ago, a routine abduction triggered first contact between our civilizations under circumstances none of us could have anticipated. The assembled delegates, 17 species representing the galaxy's established spacefaring civilizations, regarded the human representatives with varying expressions of discomfort, respect, and lingering astonishment. In that time," Kate continued, "humanity has processed the knowledge shared both willingly and unwillingly by the Xtraterrestrial Exploration Force. We have implemented medical advances that have already saved millions of lives on Earth. We have begun restoration of environmental damage using techniques previously unknown to us. And we have initiated a complete restructuring of our global governance to address the reality of our place in the galactic community." The Vordani representative pulsed with patterns indicating skepticism. "Humanity advances with concerning speed. The standard developmental timeline suggests centuries between first contact and council representation." "Perhaps," Kate countered smoothly, "your standards require adjustment." Earth united within weeks of the incident, ancient rivalries set aside in recognition of our shared humanity. Our scientific community integrated your knowledge with our own innovative approaches, creating hybrid technologies that have surprised even your most advanced research institutes. This was undeniable. The data transmitted from the infinite curiosity had catalyzed technological development on Earth, but in unexpected ways. Rather than simply copying alien technology, human scientists had approached the knowledge with fresh perspectives, finding applications and improvements that had eluded the original developers. The Miller Doctrine establishes new ethical standards for interspecies contact, noted the Aldraxian delegate, their feathered crests rising in the pattern denoting respectful acknowledgement. Already, 17 previously misclassified species have been granted protected status under its provisions. This was perhaps the most profound consequence of the incident. The comprehensive ethical reforms drafted by Kate and her team had exposed centuries of classification manipulation throughout Council space, always to the benefit of established powers and the detriment of emerging civilizations. The Xtraterrestrial counselor, her scales displaying the formal pattern of diplomatic atonement, spoke next. "The incident has triggered necessary reformation within our own society. Commander Xeltor's advocacy for exploration ethics has inspired a new generation of Xtraterrians to question practices we long accepted without examination. Indeed, Xeltor had become an unlikely ally in humanity's rapid integration into galactic society. His first-hand experience of human capabilities, particularly the fierce protective instinct that had driven Kate across space to recover her child, had transformed him from routine researcher to passionate advocate for reform. We acknowledge that humanity's path to council representation is unprecedented," Kate conceded. "But so too was the violation that precipitated our arrival. We don't ask for special consideration, only recognition that different evolutionary paths may lead to different, but equally valid, forms of civilization." The council chamber fell silent as Sophie stepped forward. Though young by human standards, she carried herself with a poise that made ancient species uncomfortable, the confidence of a mind that could adapt to new paradigms without the burden of centuries of established thinking. "Honored representatives," Sophie began, her voice clear and steady, "I stand before you as both cause and consequence of our first contact. It was my abduction that triggered this chain of events, and now I serve as living proof of humanity's capacity for growth through adversity." The assembled delegates focused their attention on the child, fascinated by this embodiment of human potential. "The universe taught you to classify and categorize," Sophie continued, speaking the words that would define interstellar relations for centuries to come. "Humanity learned to connect and protect. Your civilizations mastered the stars while forgetting why they matter. We're here to remind you that no technological achievement outweighs the fundamental responsibility of sentient beings to recognize the dignity in all life, regardless of development stage. Throughout the chamber, translators converted her words into dozens of different communication forms: light patterns, chemical signatures, neural impulses, gravitational fluctuations, each carrying the same profound challenge to centuries of established order. You've measured species by their age and technology, Sophie stated. We measure civilization by how it treats its most vulnerable members. That's the standard Earth brings to the stars. As she spoke, surveillance feeds throughout the chamber captured the impossible. Representatives from traditionally hostile species finding themselves in rare agreement, united by the uncomfortable recognition that humanity's primitive emotional attachments might represent not evolutionary weakness, but the very foundation of meaningful civilization. The Galactic Council's formal recognition of Earth as a full member, centuries ahead of previous projections, was recorded that day. Humanity's unique resilience and adaptive intelligence, now recognized as valuable counterbalances to older species' technological advantages, but increasingly rigid thinking. Later, as the Miller delegation returned to their quarters aboard the Prometheus, Kate found a moment of quiet reflection with her daughter. "Did you ever imagine this?" Sophie asked, gazing out at the stars through the viewport. Stars that were no longer distant points of light, but potential destinations, potential allies, potential challenges. Kate smiled, remembering the night 6 months ago when she had stood in Sophie's bedroom, watching helplessly as aliens took her child. "No," she admitted, "but I always knew you were destined for extraordinary things." Sophie leaned against her mother's shoulder, the gesture so human, so fundamental that it had confounded every xenopsychologist in the council. The parent-child bond, the evolutionary adaptation that had driven Kate Miller across the void to reclaim her daughter, had become the cornerstone of humanity's contribution to galactic civilization. Throughout council space, a new term entered diplomatic lexicons: Terran caution. The recognition that beneath humanity's curious and seemingly primitive exterior lay something more powerful than advanced technology or ancient wisdom, something that had emerged from Earth's evolutionary crucible and now stood as both warning and promise to the stars. The simple truth that would forever change how the galaxy understood civilization: you don't mess with human kids. Ever. In the great library of the Galactic Council, a new entry was recorded in the annals of first contact incidents. Its title, translated into Standard Galactic, read simply, "You Abducted Terran Offspring. Extraterrestrials Enraged Caution. A case study in classification failure and evolutionary underestimation." The incident that began with a child's abduction had ended with humanity's elevation, not through conquest or technological superiority, but through the most fundamental strength of their species: the unbreakable bond between parent and child, and the lengths to which a human would go to protect their own.